Hey, welcome back, guys. The definitive highlight of the Power Ghost Season 4 mid-season finale was Tariq's ego death sequence, sparked by being intentionally drugged by Brayden's doomed girlfriend. A second time such an event has taken place, mind you, as Tariq was drugged way back in Season 1 and had a tragic moment of clarity at his father's grave. In that previous revelation, Tariq arrived at the conclusion that the only person who could understand his cardinal sin against his father was the ghost man himself, leaving him in a protracted state of darkness in perpetuity. In this new sequence, however, Tariq spirals through a series of events that contain more layered meanings than presented on the surface. In this video, we'll dissect those layers and make predictions for Tariq's fate and possibilities as we patiently await the second half of this bombshell final season. Before we begin, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and bell notification to immediately receive these videos. Also, big thank you to all of my channel donors. If you'd like to be the next one, drop $1 on that Cash App for us. And lastly, a spoiler alert is now in effect for all things Power. Here we go. Prior to Tariq's acid trip and accompanying ego death, he indulged heavily in carnal activities, primarily drunkenness, fornication, and a lust for the game. All of these worldly pleasures afflicted his father, and they're important to note leading up to his spiritual awakening, because his father's sins are directly parallel towards the conclusion of these visions. Tariq has moved recklessly in the aftermath of what I refer to as the Great Betrayal, an arrangement that saw every person Tariq propelled forward in the game turn their backs on him without remorse. Every move Tariq has made since that fateful day has been in the name of revenge, and though it's a dish best served cold, it's also a blinding agent for all who deliver themselves over to it. When moving in the spirit of revenge, mistakes are omnipresent, even inevitable, because your sole purpose is to redistribute the pain you once received in tenfold fashion. This is the emotional context of Tariq's character, and it factors into his ego death visions because they are similarly at war with his most important decision to date: to game or not to game. That is the question. Are you in or are you out? And once decided, how does that look going forward? Leading up to this ultimate epiphany, Tariq still walked the tightrope of civilian and criminal. We've seen him take his best shot at civilian life and subsequently rule it out due to the lack of opportunity and control over his own destiny. Similarly, upon re-entering the game, Tariq has grown weary of the perpetual defensive stance he's had to take when being faced with the plethora of deadly hurdles that getting it the fast way presents him with. Thus, the final option for someone who desires the freedom of a criminal and the security of a civilian is to reside at the top of the underworld. Certainly, there are even pitfalls in this model, as we've seen with Ghost in ancient Power history and even Noma in more recent Power history. Being on top doesn't absolve the top dog from problems, and in many ways creates larger ones the higher you ascend. However, what it does provide is the autonomy and authority to handle those problems via proxies, and the wherewithal to insulate yourself whenever the moment demands. This is the fork in the road where Reek finds himself. But let's now turn to the visions that permeated this outlook from his perspective. After Brayden finds Tariq absolutely tripping, the latter is met by a bright light. In a spiritual context, light means goodness, wisdom, life, love, divinity, and clarity. There are multiple scriptures where God uses light to contrast the darkness and bring his people from a state of chaos to a state of stability. In fact, in the very beginning of creation, according to biblical text, God created the heavens and the earth and then illuminated both prior to the creation of the sun. So by them displaying Tariq drawing closer to the light, they're suggesting that he's getting closer to his divine purpose, or at least divine in his own eyes. Interestingly enough, Tariq then turns off the light, i.e., turning away from the goodness, the love, the wisdom, and the divinity. And then a second scene is initiated. During this scene, Tariq embraces his future son with an overjoyed Diana looking on in delight. Tariq asks his son how his day was before a distorted-voiced Cain repeats his former quote in the distance, the same one he said near the conclusion of the Great Betrayal, right before Brayden intervened on Tariq's behalf. Quote, "Been wanting to do this for a long time." Then, Diana's apparition is replaced by a gun-toting Cain, who points it directly at Tariq and his young child, not making a distinction between the two. This part of the epiphany is meant to convey Tariq's subconscious fear, and correct fear might I add, that a baby with Diana will never fully be acceptable to the Tejada family at large, especially in the case of Cain. Also, Tariq seemingly feels that him and his new family will always be in danger so long as Reek maintains an equal status with his contemporaries in the drug world. It speaks volumes to his later apex predator declaration following these visions. Tariq attempts to shield his son from Cain's wrath, only for the shot to shift the vision to a bag of blood money highlighted by the face of the ultimate Benjamin himself. In this section, Tariq conducts a drug deal with a group of unnamed men and points them towards a colorful brick wall, which I surmise is a path towards nowhere, a dead end. Diana can then be heard rebuking Tariq in the background, repeatedly screaming that, quote, "You lied. You promised me, Tariq. You promised me you'd get out. You promised. You promised." The unnamed men disappear under the sound of these assertions, and Diana appears again, this time wearing all black as opposed to the black and white she donned before. The color scheme here is interesting because the all black symbolizes immediate death, a funeral if you will, whereas black and white represents a chance or an opportunity. We could possibly live or possibly die, but there's still a possibility. It's a play on the light versus the darkness, where in the initial Diana appearance, there was a light in the midst of darkness. In Diana's second appearance, there is only darkness. A darkness brought on by the lies of Tariq, lies that also fall in line with his father's lies, which ultimately got him killed. In this part of the vision, they're trying to parallel the deceptions of the son with the deceptions of the father, concluding that both will have the exact same outcome if Tariq doesn't lead with truth. Additionally, notice here that the same outfit Diana is wearing parallels Tasha's outfit that she wore on her way to attempt to kill Ghost prior to Tariq beating her to it. And if that's not enough, they even begin playing the same version of Big Rich Town that ran during Ghost's death. The message here is that history will be repeated unless it's changed, a point that's further driven home in the third act of Tariq's vision. After Diana pulls the trigger, we get the image that we've been waiting for since the official trailer for the final season dropped. Tariq dons his father's final suit, standing in his father's club in what would be his father's final moment. While basking in this final instance of glory, a hooded version of Reek's son quietly approaches in the background, similar to how Tariq would approach the Ghost Man all those years ago. Tariq questions, "What are you doing here, son?" To which the son responds, "I'm in the way of your future, right?" Literally line for line. Tariq answers with, "If you do this, you can never go back." Then, Tariq is shown holding a gun, an interesting development as Ghost was assumed to be unarmed in his final moments at the club, having just hosted a political event there. So a question arises, was he really unarmed? Or did he choose not to draw his gun on his own son and ultimately accept his fate after making one move too many? We may never know. But what lends credence to Ghost possibly having a gun in that moment was his decree to Tommy to, quote, "let him go," sparing his son's life in exchange for his own. Tariq, in contrast to Ghost's actions during this moment, opts to draw his gun on his son and proclaim that, quote, "You can't kill me, nothing can. Not when you're at the top of the game," a callback to Ghost's own famous quote that, "No one can stop me, nothing is gonna stop me." During this bold statement, Reek attempts to shoot, only for the gun to be empty and then disappear altogether. The unseen vision of his son then converts to Tariq himself, the same version that took his father out, and donning the same apparel. This version represents the darkness, the monster, the demon, the form of Tariq that he's been battling with the entire series, the one that gets active only when called upon by Tariq's instincts, and then reburied so that his civilian version, i.e. the light or fear, can thrive until confronted by another problem that requires something more sinister than himself. When the civilian version asks the criminal version just who he is, the criminal responds with, quote, "I'm everything you could be once you stop doubting yourself. Stop pretending people's rules and expectations apply to your life, and be the man that your father was always afraid to be." Now, this was a climactic turn of events. Here, Tariq is forced to come to terms with himself, face the demon, and choose whether to fully embrace him or continue life on the tightrope of indecision and lies. This is what I believe the dark version meant by saying, "Be the man that your father was always afraid to be." You see, as Ghost's family began to grow and his operation loomed from on high, the Ghost Man started to envision a different form of freedom. Surely, the drug game placed him in rarefied air, but the burdens and stresses of such a life were not conducive to a family man with so much to lose. Plus, he had already achieved what Tariq currently aspires towards, and that meant that the only way forward was down and not up. You can't out-top the top, so to speak. Thus, Ghost chose to pivot from criminality towards legitimacy. The problem was, he still believed he could do so while using criminality as a bridge, a constant buffer whenever his legitimate efforts weren't enough to execute his goals. Therefore, he lived an undecided existence rife with deceptions until they finally caught up with him in the form of his son's wrath. This dynamic has spiritual foundations as well, for the scripture states, quote, "Ye fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath." Ghost choosing to step out on his family, disrupt their previous stability with the chaos of his unfinished romantic past, and most critically, go back on his word to Tariq regarding the Ray Ray agreement were provocations of wrath whether Ghost knew it or not. The right pathway is the definitive one, even if it's morally wrong. As the great Malcolm X once stated that, quote, "I have more respect for a man who lets me know where he stands, even if he's wrong, than the one who comes up like an angel and is nothing but a devil." Choosing your devilish nature over your virtuous one isn't ideal, but not making a clear choice at all is certain death. In this final act of Tariq's vision, he's making a clear choice. The criminal embraces the civilian, or as we just outlined, the demon hugs the angel. This hug is also a callback to Power history, as Tariq would similarly hug Ghost in Season 3 before pulling the trigger against him in Season 6. This version of Tariq was still wholly good, virtuous, and acceptable in his father's sight, not yet filled with the anger, animosity, and despair that would outline his general mood towards his father once Kanan got involved. This display of affection in Season 3 was really Ghost's final chance to bond with his son and turn him from a life of misery through honesty and transparency. But alas, his choice in this critical moment to maintain a false image would only serve to divide them in every moment after. Tariq yearned for honesty, and the person who provided it received his loyalty. But getting back to the story at hand, accepting his inevitable fate following his lifestyle choice and sins committed therein, the demon states that, quote, "You knew it would always come to this," with the gun pointing at the angel's head before pulling the trigger on the angel/civilian. Again, Tariq's choice has been made. The civilian is no more, and only the criminal remains. This was a deep sequence of events given our understanding of it in totality. And going into the second half of Season 4, I expect Tariq's actions to lean heavily on his instincts and his ultimate goal, which has never been clearer than it is right now. The top of the game, and the throne that resides there, most certainly awaits. But what are your thoughts on all of this? What did you think of Tariq's ego death sequence and Episode 5 at large? Be sure to drop me your opinions in the comments below. As always, I thank you for watching today's video. If you liked today's video, go ahead and drop $1 in that Cash App for us, hit the like button, share it with your friends who are Power fans, and subscribe for more content such as this. This is Rudy P. Magic of Rudy P. Magic Beats, and have a blessed one until the next one. Peace, y'all.